Damien Okonkwo stood at the edge of his penthouse balcony, the skyline of Victoria Island shimmering beneath him like scattered diamonds on velvet. Lagos was always loud, always moving, but inside his head was silence. A silence made heavier by something he didn't want to name: loneliness. Behind him, Chioma's high-pitched laughter echoed from the living room. She was recording another video for her followers, flaunting the new shoes he'd bought her from Paris. "My man is capable," she repeated, pouting at the camera before turning to blow a kiss toward him. But Damien didn't respond. He had lost count of how many times she'd called him my man online, only for her eyes to glaze over when he tried to talk about his late father or his dreams of building affordable housing in his village. To Chioma, he was the lifestyle, the brand, the content, not the man. Later that night, his fiancée Amarachi arrived from Abuja, breezing into his home with Louis Vuitton luggage and oversized sunglasses. She walked like she was always on a runway, tossing expensive hair back and grinning. "I've been planning our Dubai trip, baby," she said, without even greeting the house staff. "All my girls are hyped. We're going to shut down the desert." Damien managed a tight smile as he helped her settle in, but deep inside, his chest ached. Not from pain, but from a quiet realization that had been forming like a storm cloud. These women, beautiful, stylish, educated, never asked him how he was doing. They didn't care about the man beneath the billionaire title. They only cared that their man was capable. His mother had warned him, "If you want to know who truly loves you, take away your name and wealth, and watch who stays." And so, that night, as he sat alone in his study, Damien made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out 2 identical matte black credit cards, both linked to a special 10 million Nigerian nairas test fund. A third one sat quietly in the drawer, his personal. He wasn't trying to trap anyone or humiliate them. He just wanted to see who would use it wisely, who would reflect heart, not ego. He would give one card to Chioma, the other to Amarachi. No restrictions. No rules. He would tell them both to use it for whatever mattered most to them. Charity, business, family, fun, anything. Just one simple sentence: "Use it to show me who you are." Then he would sit back and watch. If they failed, at least he would have clarity. And if they passed, he might finally believe love wasn't dead. But something told him neither would. What he didn't expect, however, was how a third woman, one he had barely noticed before, would enter his heart like a whisper that turns into a storm. The next day, Damien executed his plan with calm precision. Chioma was the first. She strolled in wearing a skin-tight jumpsuit and lashes that could slice wind. He invited her to the quiet side of the pool deck, handed her a glass of champagne, and placed the black card in her hand with a small smile. "Use it for anything," he said. "Anything that truly matters to you." Chioma gasped like she'd just seen heaven. "Babe, is this one of those cards that can buy a private jet?" she laughed, already reaching for her phone to record the moment. He only smiled again, refusing to give further instructions. Whatever she did next would speak louder than words. The moment she left, she texted her stylist, "Gelly must tighten. We're shutting down Lekki Phase 1 today." Within hours, she was on Instagram Live, holding up bundles of human hair, gold heels, and Gucci bags. "My boo is not your boo," she sang. Damien sat in silence and watched. 2 days later, it was Amarachi's turn. She was even more excited than Chioma. She took the card, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "My king, I'll make you proud." But her next move was not subtle. She booked a first-class ticket to London the same day, posing at Murtala Muhammad Airport with a Louis Vuitton backpack and champagne glass. Her caption read, "When your man is capable, you don't ask prices. You just shop." Damien scrolled through the photos that evening. Dubai, Paris, Milan, all cities she was exploring using his card. Not a single message to check on him. Not a word about her mother, or any gesture of generosity. Just posts. Just vibes. Just proof that she had won the billionaire lottery. And with every selfie she posted, a weight settled deeper in his chest. This wasn't about hurt anymore. This was about clarity. About truth. Back at the mansion, life continued quietly, except for one small shift. Ngozi, his maid, began moving more carefully around him. She was always respectful, always quiet, but now her eyes carried a weight. One night, after Chioma had thrown a tantrum over imported scented candles, Ngozi knocked at his study. "Oga, please, I'm sorry to disturb," she said, voice low and shaking. "My mama, she collapsed in the village. The doctor said is kidney complications. I don't have that kind money now, but if you can give me advance, small, I will pay back." Damien blinked. He had forgotten this girl existed beyond chores and her simple headscarf. And now here she was, not asking for shopping, not for selfies, but begging to save her mother's life. Something inside him paused. He pulled open the drawer and quietly reached for the last 1,000,000 Nigerian nairas on the card. "Don't make me regret this," he said as he handed her the card. She took it with trembling hands, tears already brimming in her eyes. "I swear, sir, I will pay you back. I can cook at night. I can clean even more. I won't run, I promise." Damien simply nodded. "Just focus on your mother. That's all I ask." Ngozi dropped to her knees immediately, bowing her head 3 times before leaving the room. When she was gone, he sat back, stunned. Her humility wasn't performance. It was real. Pure. There was something sacred about a woman who cried not because she lacked, but because she refused to steal. Unlike the other two, Ngozi asked not for luxuries, but time. Time to build, not destroy. That night, Damien sat awake for hours, unable to shake her face from his mind. That quiet, tearful gratitude. That dignity wrapped in poverty. And for the first time in years, he felt a seed of emotion he couldn't name. The next morning, Chioma sent another video of herself in a jacuzzi, surrounded by champagne bottles and giggling friends. "When your man is rich, every day is weekend," she screamed as Damien muted his phone. Amarachi sent a picture from the Eiffel Tower with the caption, "You can't sit with us unless your man owns real estate in Paris." Damien closed the gallery app and walked to the balcony, phone heavy in his palm. Was this what he'd built his life for? To be a trophy provider for women who saw his love as a transaction? He wanted to scream, but instead he turned away and drove out. Quietly, anonymously, he ended up in a corner of Surulere where he hadn't been in years. There, under a flickering streetlight, he saw a small makeshift food stand. A familiar figure stood behind it, headscarf tight, apron stained, face glistening with sweat. Ngozi. She was selling hot jollof and stew beside a mechanic workshop. Her hands moved fast. Her mouth kept repeating, "God bless you," to every customer. Damien didn't approach. He just sat in the car, parked in the shadows, watching her work. Tirelessly, elegantly, silently. It was then he realized the 2 women he had trusted with millions were showing him their pride. But the woman he had overlooked was showing him her soul. The rain poured heavily that night, beating the windows of the mansion like a quiet protest against the madness of the world. Most of the household had gone to sleep, but Damien stayed up, reviewing proposals on his tablet with a glass of untouched whiskey beside him. His mind kept wandering, not to profits or numbers, but to the girl he had seen in Surulere. The image of Ngozi, sleeves rolled up, sweat soaking her back as she dished out steaming rice and stew to strangers who barely noticed her. It haunted him. He had gone there again today, unannounced, hiding behind tinted glass like a thief watching an angel work. Her stand had grown slightly. A wooden bench now supported a few customers. Her smile never left, even when her generator coughed mid-shift. It was raw dignity, and it was a stark reminder of everything Amarachi and Chioma lacked, despite all their glitter. That same night, he heard a soft knock at the study door. He assumed it was the security guard, but when the door creaked open, Ngozi stepped in, soaked to the skin. She had just returned from her buka and barely had time to change. Her eyes were red from smoke and exhaustion, but there was no trace of entitlement. Just fear, the kind of fear a poor daughter has when her mother's life hangs by a thread. "Oga," she said, kneeling gently, "a beg, I day sorry to disturb, but my mama, the medicine day, cost pass, when I fit manage." She opened a tattered bag and pulled out a brown envelope of crumpled 100 Nigerian nairas and 200 Nigerian nairas notes. This one now 300,000 Nigerian nairas, way I don gather, since I start sell. Her voice cracked. The medicine still needs 700,000 Nigerian nairas. If you fit borrow me, I go work 2 times, 3 times. I go pay back. I just need grace, sir. I no day beg for free. Damien sat frozen, her words echoing inside him. She wasn't just asking for money. She was begging for a chance, to protect her mother, to preserve her dignity, to remain human. This was a woman who had every reason to steal, but instead, she was asking to earn her way out of pain. And in that moment, Damien realized something horrifying. This maid had more pride and loyalty in her desperation than the 2 women he was planning to marry had in their abundance. Take it, he said quietly, reaching for his wallet. Nigerian naira 700,000. You don't have to pay it back immediately. Just promise me one thing, don't give up. Her tears fell freely now, and she didn't speak. She only knelt and placed her forehead on the floor. The billionaire who was surrounded by wealth every day had just given out money, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like an investment, not in business, but in someone's soul. The days that followed became a rhythm of quiet observation. Damien watched from afar as Ngozi transformed her struggle into movement. She never asked him for anything else. She resumed her maid duties every morning without complaint, sweeping, cleaning, and arranging his room like nothing had changed. But every evening, by 5:30 p.m. sharp, she left with her basket of coolers and took a danfo to the same corner in Surulere, where she cooked until late into the night. She wasn't just trying, she was fighting. With every grain of rice she sold, she was keeping a promise. And Damien couldn't look away. The contrast between her and the women in his life grew so sharp it cut him. Chioma had just checked into a hotel for a week-long spa retreat, all funded by the Black Card. Amarachi had extended her Paris day, booking shopping appointments with luxury fashion houses. Meanwhile, Ngozi was calculating the price of tomatoes in Ojulegba. Damien couldn't sleep most nights. Something was unraveling inside him, an ache that wasn't lust, wasn't pity, wasn't curiosity. It was something deeper, a kind of respect, a guilt, even an admiration. He began stopping by Ngozi's buka in disguise, sometimes with Uche or Kelvin, who never knew his real reason for being there. He pretended to buy food, watching her interact with customers. Her hands were rough, her nails unpainted, but every gesture she made had grace. Her apron was old, but her smile was young. The wind would blow her scarf back sometimes, revealing a beautiful round face, sweat-lined and exhausted, yet still striking. And when their eyes met once across the street, when she saw him parked and looked directly at him, she gave a small bow and smiled, as though she had seen God himself. Damien drove off immediately. That look stayed with him all night. But inside the mansion, the pressure built. Chioma returned and threw a tantrum when she found that her special rosewater candles were no longer in stock. "I told you to order them monthly," she screamed at the housekeeper. Amarachi, upon her return, complained about the dust on her designer handbags. Not once did either woman ask Damien how he was. Not once did they wonder why he was so quiet. And when he sat them both down on separate evenings and asked what they planned to do with their futures, both gave vague answers about enjoying life with him. That was when he knew. They had both failed the test, not because they spent money, but because they revealed what they valued. And as for Ngozi, she had revealed something else entirely: worth. Ngozi's life had become a dual existence. In the mansion, she was still the silent maid who mopped floors and polished tiles. In the streets, she was Auntie Ngozi, the jollof queen of that Surulere corner, known for her generous portions and peppered meat. She lived like a shadow between two worlds, invisible in one, undeniable in the other. But even she knew her secret was fragile. She had no idea that the man she worked for, the same man who had saved her mother's life, was now her silent customer, watching from behind tinted glass as she rose from nothing with grace. She did not know that the 700,000 Nigerian nairas he gave her had become a mirror to his own conscience. All she knew was that she owed him a debt, not just of money, but of faith. And she was determined to pay him back. Her food stand expanded. A carpenter from the area built her a small wooden shack to shield her from the rain. A young boy from the street began helping her serve. She saved every naira. She didn't eat from the pot. She slept less than 4 hours a night. And somehow, she still showed up at the mansion by 7 a.m. to resume work. Damien observed every detail. He began asking the driver to take long routes just to pass by her buka. He couldn't explain it to himself. This woman, once invisible, now occupied his mind more than any of the women dressed in gold and silk. His friends noticed his silence, but he offered no explanation. And when Amarachi asked why he hadn't joined her in France, he only said, "I've been watching something more important here." What disturbed him most wasn't just the growing feeling he had for Ngozi. It was the fact that he didn't want to feel it. His male ego fought against it. Uche's voice echoed in his head. "You want fall for house girl? Brothers, just chop and move." But Damien wasn't interested in sex. He had that with Chioma. He had companionship with Amarachi. What Ngozi gave him, unknowingly, was something raw. Truth. And truth was intoxicating. Each time she walked past him in the mansion with her bucket or mop, he noticed things he never did before. How she walked barefoot when she was sad. How she tied her scarf tighter when she was angry. How she always sniffed the cleaning products before using them, as though making sure they were real. And one day, he watched her fall asleep on a bench in the backyard after returning from her buka. Sunlight kissed her face. For the first time in years, Damien whispered to himself, "She's beautiful." Damien sat in the back of his car in silence, tinted windows shielding him as he watched the scene unfold outside. Ngozi stood behind her growing food stand, now equipped with a small umbrella, 2 plastic chairs for customers, and a wooden bench where she neatly arranged takeaway packs and plastic spoons. She wasn't wearing her maid uniform tonight, just a faded yellow Ankara wrapper, a brown top stained with oil, and an apron knotted at the back. Her scarf was tied high today, keeping the sweat off her brow as she turned hot ifo riro in a large silver pot. She was exhausted. He could see it in her slight limp as she fetched water from a small keg, but she moved like a woman with purpose. Her hands never stopped. She smiled at every customer. She apologized when there was delay. She gave an extra spoon of meat to a pregnant customer who couldn't afford enough. "No worry, sister," she said softly. "God go bless me from somewhere." Damien's chest tightened. For the next 20 minutes, he watched silently as life moved around her. Mechanics stopped by for suya rice. A man on a motorcycle came to buy umla for his wife. A teenage girl walked by and whispered to her friend, "That ani day try. Her food day, sweet die." Ngozi never once acted like she was doing anything grand. She wasn't flashy. No Instagram videos. No shouts of soft life. Just honest, consistent, sweaty work. Damien leaned forward and whispered to his driver, "Buy a plate. Don't tell her it's for me." The driver hesitated, but obeyed. When he returned, Damien opened the takeaway box and inhaled the scent. Smoky jollof, spicy chicken, and dodo, fried golden. It was simple, but it was real. That word again, real. The one thing he hadn't felt in years. As he ate quietly, something in his spirit calmed. This wasn't just good food. This was love in rice form. And it wasn't made for clout. It was made for survival. The next day at the mansion, Damien found himself distracted. Chioma was back, parading around the compound in a sheer beach robe and bikini, complaining about the chlorine in the pool. "Baby, tell your pool guy to stop using village water," she hissed, annoyed. Meanwhile, Amarachi was calling from Milan, saying she wanted to host a brunch for the Lagos elite once she returned. Something elegant, with champagne towers and soft jazz, she added. Damien barely listened. His mind was still with Ngozi, back in Surulere, stirring stew by candlelight. That evening, when she entered his study with her usual cleaning tray, he looked up. "Ngozi," he said. She froze. He rarely called her by name. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "How's your mother?" Damien asked. Her eyes widened. She smiled gently, tears threatening to spill. "She day better. The medicine day work." She placed her rag down and bowed slightly. "Thank you again, sir." But Damien shook his head slowly. No. Thank you for reminding me what real grace looks like. The following weekend marked Amarachi's grand return from Milan. She stepped into the mansion wearing a silk floral gown that trailed behind her like royalty. Her makeup was flawless, her lips a glossy cherry red. "Baby, come downstairs," she called out like a queen returning to her kingdom. Damien appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed in a black tee and joggers, a quiet frown on his face. He didn't rush down. He didn't smile. Amarachi didn't seem to notice. She opened her Louis Vuitton travel case in the living room and began displaying expensive heels and bags as though preparing for a fashion haul. "This one is for brunch in Banana Island. This one is for the Abuja wedding. This one, not just to show them say elegance, no be noise." Damien stood silently, watching, not because he admired her style, but because he was finally seeing her clearly, and there was nothing there. Only ego. Only noise. Chioma wasn't far behind. She returned from her spa retreat at a high-end hotel in Lekki, nails freshly done, phone filled with videos of her dancing in robes, eating strawberries by the pool. "You go like the one where I did twerk beside the fountain," she teased, showing Damien her latest Instagram reel. The comments down below, over 8,000 likes. "Dem day die for my skin." Damien nodded absently and returned to his laptop. Chioma noticed and frowned. "Why you day act distant since? Abi person day give you problem?" she asked suspiciously. He didn't answer. But later that night, when she tried to seduce him in lingerie, he gently turned away. "I'm tired," he said flatly. That lie was easier than explaining the truth, that her body no longer moved him, that her giggles were grating, that her world, all makeup and filters, felt like a performance he was no longer willing to clap for. Meanwhile, Ngozi remained her quiet self. She resumed her shifts early, washed the sheets with care, scrubbed the marble tiles till they shone. But behind her silence was fire. Each evening, she returned to Surulere, expanded her buka, added new dishes to the menu. Egusi, beans and plantain, EBA. She now had 2 boys helping her serve. She was slowly building something, with grit, sweat, and unshakable dignity. Damien noticed everything. He said nothing, but his eyes followed her, and Chioma noticed. So did Amarachi. They caught the way Damien paused when Ngozi entered a room. They heard the subtle warmth in his voice when he greeted her. Something shifted in the air. Jealousy, like perfume, began to rise. Not loud, yet, but dangerously simmering. And for the first time, the 2 women who once ruled his world felt threatened by a woman who didn't even own a lipstick. It started with whispers. One afternoon, Chioma leaned on the kitchen counter, sipping coconut water, her long nails clinking against the glass. She turned to the chef. "That maid, Ngozi, she dey form innocent, ABI? But you sabi say all these poor girls sabi jazz well." The chef didn't respond, just kept chopping onions. Later that day, Amarachi called Damien while he was working and said, "Babe, I heard Ngozi has been staying out late. I hope she's not involved in anything shady. You know girls from the slums can be crafty." Damien didn't answer, but inside, anger flickered. He realized that the 2 women were not just suspicious, they were starting to panic. And when they began to subtly insult Ngozi in front of guests and other staff, he knew the war had begun. Not one waged with weapons, but with whispers, looks, and poison dipped in elegance. One evening, Chioma purposely walked into the kitchen and accidentally bumped Ngozi with her shoulder. "Oops," she said, smirking. Ngozi turned and simply bowed her head. "Sorry, Ma." But her face said it all. She was hurt, humiliated, but she would not react. Amarachi followed suit, dropping snide comments like, "This house day smell like pepper soup these days. A beg tell that your assistant to reduce the village scent." Damien overheard everything. He didn't speak. But the next morning, he called the entire staff and said in front of Chioma and Amarachi, "Ngozi, I noticed how hard you've been working. I want you to know I appreciate you deeply. Please make sure you eat first before others. You've earned that much." The room fell silent. Chioma's face burned. Amarachi crossed her arms and looked away. And from that moment, they both knew their reign was ending. Quietly, without scandal. But surely, Damien didn't understand everything he was feeling yet. He still wrestled with guilt. Still told himself, she's just a maid. Still tried to convince himself that maybe this was a phase, a savior complex. But no, he knew better. He had seen 1,000 faces. Slept with women more beautiful than Ngozi. But none of them stirred him like this. She had become a mirror, not just of what he lacked, but of what he longed for. Love without noise. Loyalty without contract. Beauty without vanity. And perhaps most terrifying of all, her presence made him feel human again. Not rich. Not powerful. Just a man. And in a world that worshipped image, Ngozi had become the quiet truth he could no longer run from. The tension in the mansion finally broke during a casual Sunday brunch Damien organized for a few close friends and extended staff. It was meant to be low-key, nothing fancy, just a simple gathering on the patio with grilled fish, palm wine, and laughter. But for Chioma and Amarachi, it was another chance to flaunt their status. Chioma arrived in a body-hugging orange dress and gold heels, camera crew in tow, already vlogging. "We outside with my billionaire," she screamed into the lens, twirling dramatically. Amarachi came 30 minutes late, wearing a feathered white gown with a statement bag from Paris. "Sorry, darling, I had a facial," she lied, though Damien hadn't even asked. The moment Ngozi stepped out, wearing a clean Maid uniform and carrying a tray of drinks, Chioma raised her voice. "Ngozi, make sure you wash your hands before you serve. You know how village girls carry bacteria." Some people laughed. Damien didn't. He stood, quietly, and the entire atmosphere shifted. He walked over, took the tray from Ngozi's shaking hands, and set it down gently. His eyes locked on Chioma, then Amarachi, then the guests. "Let me make this very clear," he began, voice low but firm. "This woman you keep mocking? She's more honest than every designer bag in this compound. She didn't take money from me to buy wigs or fly abroad. She asked me to borrow her money to save her mother's life, and she's been working day and night to repay it. You, Chioma," he said, pointing, "use that card to parade around as if you won a lottery. Amarachi, you booked 3 vacations and forgot to even ask how I was doing." The room fell into dead silence. No one had ever seen Damien this cold. Chioma blinked rapidly. Amarachi gasped, and one of the chefs quietly stepped back into the kitchen. "Damien wasn't done. I gave you both 10 million Nigerian nairas, not as a gift, but as a test. And you failed. Spectacularly." Then he turned to Ngozi. "You may go," he said gently. "You've done more than enough today." Ngozi walked out with tears she refused to shed. Not because she was ashamed, but because for the first time someone had defended her publicly. Her hands trembled as she untied her apron behind the house, whispering prayers under her breath. Meanwhile, Chioma stormed out, fake lashes flapping from her tears. "You embarrassed me in front of people," she screamed, throwing her shoe as she got into her car. Amarachi sat frozen, processing the humiliation. Damien didn't care. He walked past them both, entered his study, and locked the door. Inside, he took a deep breath. He had finally said the words that had lived in his chest for weeks. No more pretending. No more tolerating surface-level love. The test was over. And ironically, the woman who had nothing, no heels, no gloss, no clout, had emerged as the one with everything. Integrity, strength, and something even money couldn't buy, a beautiful, unapologetic soul. Ngozi had not planned to return the card so soon. She had mapped out a plan to repay Damien in 6 months, using the profit from her buka and the small cash she had started saving daily. But after the public confrontation during the brunch, she couldn't sleep. She felt exposed, seen, valued, but also unworthy. Something inside her told her she needed to close this chapter, to return what wasn't hers and walk away with her head high. So 3 days later, she packed 1.3 million Nigerian nairas into a plain brown envelope, borrowed a small glass bowl from the kitchen, placed the black card inside, and tied a ribbon around it using leftover thread from her mother's wrapper. She wore her cleanest wrapper, tied her scarf with care, and waited patiently for a moment when Damien would be alone. It came during twilight, the hour when the house became quiet, and the day whispered its secrets to the night. She walked into his study gently, barely making a sound. He looked up surprised. She didn't speak at first. She simply stepped forward and knelt, placing the bowl and envelope on his desk. "Sir," she began, her voice calm but full of emotion, "this is your card. I've finished. I don't owe again. I even add the small gain. You help my mama. You give me chance to stand. But I can't keep it anymore." Damien stared at the card and the money like they were glowing. He didn't know what to say. He had never seen this before, a woman returning more than she took. In a world where people demanded gifts, here was someone returning a loan with interest, unasked, unforced, and full of honor. "I still be your worker, sir," Ngozi added. "But I want thank you truly. Treat me like dog. God bless you." Then she stood, bowed, and turned to leave. But Damien called her name. "Ngozi," he said, voice suddenly unsteady. She turned slowly. "Thank you," he whispered. "You reminded me of something I lost." After she left, Damien sat alone for hours. He stared at the envelope, the card, and the thread-tied bowl like a man watching proof that miracles still existed. It wasn't about the money. It was about the dignity with which she had handled it. Most people would have taken more. Many would have asked for extensions. Some would have lied. But Ngozi, the maid he barely noticed months ago, had carried herself with the weight of a queen. He picked up the envelope, opened it, and wept. Not because he was weak, but because for the first time in his adult life, someone had done something for him. Not because he was rich, not because they wanted anything, but because it was right. And in a world full of noise, Ngozi had become his silence, the calm, the truth, the peace he had long forgotten. The mansion felt different now. There was an invisible shift in the air, like the smell of earth after rainfall. Damien had always walked through his home like a king in a palace, moving with control and detachment. But now he lingered in corridors, sat longer at the dining table, spoke softer to the staff. And above all, he watched Ngozi, not with lust, not with pity, but with a strange ache he didn't know how to name. He started waking earlier, just to hear her sweeping the front yard, her soft hum barely rising above the breeze. He began checking the kitchen when she was cooking, offering to taste her stew for salt, just so he could see her smile. Every time she spoke, he listened like it was music. Every time she laughed, he felt something warm bloom in his chest. His heart wasn't breaking from pain. It was breaking open from rediscovery. Love, it seemed, had snuck in disguised as humility. One afternoon, Damien entered the kitchen just as Ngozi was trying to reach for a tray on the top shelf. Without thinking, he moved behind her and lifted it down. Their hands touched. She froze. He froze. The room was silent. Ngozi turned slowly, and their eyes locked. No words. No tension. Just energy, raw and trembling. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded, but didn't move away. He wanted to. He should have. But something in that moment pulled him in. He looked at her face, truly looked. The freckles around her nose. The thin scar under her left eye. The way her bottom lip curved slightly to the right. She wasn't polished. She wasn't loud. But to him, she was devastatingly beautiful. "Ngozi," he whispered, barely audible. She looked down immediately. "Yes, sir?" "Nothing," he said, stepping back quickly. "You can go." She nodded and hurried out. But as she walked away, her heart thundered in her chest. Something had changed, and both of them knew it. That night, Damien sat by his window, staring into the dark. The city below buzzed with wealth and chaos, but inside his chest, there was only one thought: Ngozi. He thought about what his friends would say, about what society would mock. A billionaire with a maid? The tabloids would explode. His board members would gossip. His ex-lovers would rage. But none of that mattered anymore. Because in a world where everyone wore masks, she had dared to be real. And he had fallen for her because of it. Not in the glamorous way films showed. Not with violin music or dramatic kisses. But slowly, painfully, honestly. And as he sat there alone in the dark, he finally allowed himself to whisper the words that scared him most. I'm in love with her. Damien sat at a high-end lounge in Ikoyi with Uche and Kelvin, his longtime friends and business allies. They clinked glasses over aged whiskey, laughed about politics, and debated real estate trends. But beneath the surface, something simmered. Uche leaned forward first, his voice lowered and teasing. Guy, when I day here SEF? You day obsess over your maid. Damien sipped slowly, eyes fixed on the TV. Her name is Ngozi, he said evenly. Kelvin chuckled. Brothers, a beg no vex. But all these girls wait clean tile for morning day, carry charm for night. Uche nodded, smirking. If you want chop the food, chop 'em. But don't disgrace yourself by falling for her. Damien said nothing, but his grip on the glass tightened. They didn't see what he saw. They couldn't. To them, she was still the maid. To him, she had become his mirror, his proof that beauty and strength weren't always loud. Sometimes, they were wearing aprons and tying scarves in silence. The conversation escalated. Uche leaned back smugly, tossing his car keys. Look, Damien. You're a billionaire. You get power, looks, everything. You fit Carrie's senator daughter. Even celebrity, SEF, go say yes if you talk. Kelvin added, you know day, own Ngozi anything. You helped her, she day grateful, perfect. But to now fall in love? Brothers, that one now witchcraft. Or pity. Damien dropped his glass, gently. She's not a project, he said, his voice low but dangerous. She didn't ask for my money. She worked for everything she has. She's built more with 1 million naira than some of these women I've dated built with 10. That's not pity. That's character. The table went silent. Kelvin blinked. Uche scoffed. Okay nah. If you say so. But no complain when she use jazz tie you like goat. Damien stood, buttoned his blazer, and walked out. He didn't look back. That night, as he drove home, he realized something. It wasn't just society he would have to fight. It was every man who thought love was about status, not substance. Back at the mansion, he found Ngozi mopping the floor near the front door. She stood quickly when she saw him, trying to move aside. Good evening, sir. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, you don't have to mop tonight. Go rest. She nodded, quietly grateful, and walked away. But he kept watching her. The way she tucked in her scarf, the way her feet barely made noise as she moved. The image of Uche mocking her still echoed in his head. But so did Ngozi's laughter from Ibuka, the way she fed that mechanic's baby for free, the way she had once returned his money with extra, while women in diamonds still owed him emotional debt. He knew the world would never understand. But for once, he didn't need them to. What he felt was real. And real doesn't ask for permission. Sunday morning arrived with quiet drama. The house staff moved around preparing breakfast as usual, but there was a strange calm in the air, like something sacred was about to happen. Damien sat in the dining room alone, dressed simply in a white shirt and navy trousers, Bible beside his plate, flipping slowly through verses he hadn't read in years. He wasn't particularly religious, but lately he found himself drawn to silence, to reflection, to anything that felt like truth. He heard movement by the stairs and looked up. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe. Ngozi descended slowly, not in her maid uniform, but in a long, modest white gown that brushed her ankles. Her scarf had been replaced by a soft, puffed afro. Her face was makeup-free, just a touch of lip balm and grace. She held a worn Bible in one hand and a small offering envelope in the other. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. And yet, Damien had never seen anything more beautiful in his life. The room went quiet. The other staff froze. Even the cook stopped stirring the pot. Ngozi smiled softly and greeted everyone, her tone humble but confident. Good morning, sir, she said when she reached Damien. He cleared his throat, eyes still on her. You look radiant. She blushed and looked down. It's just church clothes, sir. But it wasn't. It was a revelation. For the first time, the entire house saw Ngozi as more than the girl who cleaned floors or fetched water. She stood like a woman fully aware of her worth, not in arrogance, but in quiet assurance. And for Damien's mother, who had arrived from Enugu the night before and was now descending the staircase. It was her first real introduction. Mama Neka stopped halfway down and stared at the scene. She had heard rumors from the staff, heard whispers that her son was getting too close to the help. But nothing prepared her for the reality of Ngozi's poise, or the respectful way she bowed and greeted her. "Good morning, Ma." The older woman didn't respond immediately. She simply walked closer and stood before Ngozi, scanning her from head to toe. Ngozi didn't flinch. She held her envelope tightly and kept her gaze low. After a few tense seconds, Mama Neka nodded slightly. "You're the one feeding half of Surrelir with your stew, ABI?" she asked. Ngozi nodded once. "Yes, Ma." The woman smiled faintly. "You go church, you run business, you still work here. You get strong spirit." She turned to Damien. "We go church together, ABI." Damien stood, walked beside Ngozi, and without thinking, placed his hand gently at her back. "Yes, Mama. Let's go." And for the first time, the staff witnessed a scene that felt like prophecy. A maid, a mother, and a billionaire walking side by side into something no one could stop. The mansion buzzed the next week, but not with celebration, with whispers. Word had spread that Damien had taken Ngozi to church. Not Chioma, not Amarachi, the maid. And Lagos gossip moved faster than lightning. Amarachi returned from her travel to find her name no longer carrying weight. Her stylist mentioned Damien's church appearance, with one beautiful girl in white. Chioma stormed into the mansion the next evening, phone in hand, fuming. "Damien, what is this nonsense I'm hearing?" she barked. "You're now dating your maid? Is that what I reduced to? A joke?" Damien didn't even blink. He looked up from his tablet and said, "You reduced yourself when you chose image over substance." Chioma threw her bag against the wall. "You're going to regret this. I swear you will." But he had heard worse threats. He had seen prettier women with uglier souls. Her noise couldn't reach him anymore. His peace was louder. Amarachi was more strategic. She didn't confront Damien directly. She met with Chioma secretly at a restaurant and devised a plan. "Let's dig into that girl," she said. "Find her background. Maybe she has a child she abandoned, or an uncle in prison. Let's shake her a bit." Chioma agreed, her ego craving revenge. "That girl go smell pepper. I go make sure say she pack her Ghana must go bag by force." Meanwhile, Ngozi continued her work unaware of the storm gathering. She served food with her usual grace, responded to insults with silence, and continued her buka hustle with consistency. But even she started to notice small things. Her uniform missing from the laundry basket, a whisper from a security guard who wouldn't look her in the eye. She knew something was off. But she had no idea just how far these women were willing to go. One night, Damien returned from a board meeting and found Ngozi sitting outside on the pavement, head bowed, a small tear running down her cheek. He rushed to her. "What happened?" he asked, voice filled with alarm. She wiped her face quickly. "Nothing, sir. I'm okay." But he pressed gently. She finally whispered, "Someone broke into my buka this afternoon. They scatter everything. My pots, my coolers, even carry some of my ingredients." Damien's jaw clenched. His silence was volcanic. "Did you report it?" She nodded. "Yes. But police say nah area boys. They know sure." He knelt beside her and gently took her hand. "Ngozi, listen to me. This is not area boys. This is war. And I promise you, whoever touched what you built touched me." The night swallowed his vow, but the fire in his chest was clear. They had crossed a line. The chaos of the buka attack left Ngozi rattled, but it didn't break her. If anything, it sharpened her resolve. The next morning, she woke up at 4 a.m., knelt by her mattress, and prayed with tears in her eyes. Her enemies had touched her livelihood, not because she did anything wrong, but because she dared to rise. After sweeping the compound and finishing her early duties, she left a note for the other maid and rushed to Surrelir. The sight of her broken cooler and overturned bench pierced her heart. Still, she didn't cry. She began cleaning up alone until an older customer, the mechanic who often ate her beans, stopped by and asked what happened. "Dem want frustrate your grace, auntie." "No gree," he said. He brought nails and wood. Another customer brought new plastic chairs. Word spread. By evening, 10 people had helped rebuild the stand. A friend of her late father offered her an empty shop nearby for 10,000 Nigerian nairas a month. She accepted. That night, she moved her cooking pot into her first real indoor space. Damien watched everything unfold in real time. Unbeknownst to Ngozi, he had hired a private investigator to discreetly watch over her and keep him informed. He knew she would never tell him the full extent of the damage. That's who she was, humble to the bone, never wanting to be a burden. So he did what he had to do, silently. He sent a trusted associate, Mr. Ao, to pose as a kind landlord-investor, and paid the entire year's rent for the new shop through him. He also replaced her stolen cooler and added a small gas burner and industrial frying pan to the supplies. Ngozi was stunned when Mr. Ao returned with everything and said simply, "A man said you deserve better." He didn't leave his name. She didn't need to guess. Only one man in Lagos would do something so quietly and still walk away. That evening, she cooked afang soup and rice in her new shop. Before midnight, she had served over 80 customers. The shop was too small to hold everyone, but it held her dream. Her growth wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. With every plate of food she served, with every thank you she whispered, Ngozi stood taller. She now employed 2 young girls from the area and began training them. She paid them weekly, offered lunch, and taught them how to speak respectfully to customers. "No insult anybody," she always said. "Even if dem curse you, still give dem water to drink." God day watch. Damien visited her shop once in disguise. He wore a face cap, local slippers, and entered with sunglasses. She didn't recognize him, but he saw her, truly saw her, smiling at a pregnant woman who couldn't pay full price. "Take it," she said, placing extra fish in her plate. "Your baby go remember this day." And just like that, Damien knew. This woman wasn't just building a business. She was building a legacy of love. And her name deserved to be remembered not just in the streets, but in his heart, and maybe one day at the altar. The moment finally came one afternoon when Damien's mother, Mama Neka, asked him to sit beside her under the shaded veranda, where she often took her midday tea. "Damien, come. Let's talk like mother and son," she said. Her tone wasn't confrontational, but it carried the weight of knowing. Damien obeyed. She looked at him carefully, her fingers clasped around her rosary beads. "This girl Ngozi," she began slowly, "she is not like the other women I've seen around you. And I've been watching. Her eyes don't lie. Her steps don't shake. She carries pain, but still gives peace. What exactly are your intentions?" Damien's heart pounded. He looked at his mother, this woman who raised him, who buried his father with her bare hands, who once sold her gold earrings to pay his school fees. He couldn't lie to her. He didn't want to. "Mama," he said, voice quiet but strong, "I'm in love with her." Mama Neka sat back and sighed deeply. She didn't react with shock. She didn't shout. She simply nodded as though she had known all along. "It will not be easy," she said after a while. "The world will spit. The rich will mock. Your father's friends will say you've lost your mind. But my son, let me tell you something important. Character is the only currency that never devalues." She paused. "I watched that girl carry my food when she thought I was too old to move. I saw her place wrapper under my feet when the ground was cold. She thought I didn't notice. But I did. The way she treats strangers tells me all I need to know about how she will treat you. If you say you love her, then I will not stand in your way." Damien's eyes filled with gratitude. He didn't realize how much her support meant until now. In that moment he understood. True wealth was not in billions or buildings, but in knowing you were loved by someone who could see your soul. Later that evening, Mama Neka called Ngozi quietly. "Neni, sit with me," she said gently. Ngozi hesitated, unsure of what she had done wrong. "Yes, Ma," she said, wiping her hands nervously on her wrapper. The older woman smiled. "I want to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer." Ngozi nodded slowly. "Do you love my son?" Ngozi's eyes widened. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her heart beat loudly. I respect him, Ma. He is kind to me. But do you love him? Mama pressed, her tone still soft. Ngozi lowered her eyes and whispered, I think I do, Ma. But I'm scared. People will laugh. I don't want him to regret me. Mama Neka reached forward and held her hand. If he regrets you, he regrets the best part of himself. Ngozi began to cry. And in that moment, the maid and the mother-in-law weren't enemies or opposites. They were two women bound by truth, trying to protect the same man. The annual corporate gala for Damien's real estate empire arrived in grand fashion, an event held in one of the most luxurious ballrooms in Lagos, where CEOs, influencers, politicians, and foreign investors gathered to drink wine, make deals, and whisper gossip. Chioma arrived dressed in a plunging sequin gown, Amarachi not far behind in a gold mermaid dress. Both had heard rumors that Damien might show up with someone new, but neither expected him to arrive alone. When he entered, black tuxedo, no date, heads turned. Cameras flashed. Reporters asked about his new skyscraper project, but his answers were short, his eyes distracted. Meanwhile, Ngozi sat quietly backstage, helping coordinate catering through a vendor she had been subcontracted under. Her food had made its way to the event through a referral, one of the many silent ways Damien supported her without making her feel small. She wore a simple long gown, apron over it, hair tied neatly in a bun. She was not meant to be seen, until everything changed. Midway through the gala, Chioma spotted Ngozi at the food station. Her fury ignited. She marched toward her and hissed loud enough for guests nearby to hear. So this is the local champion that stole my man? The maid that turned CEO overnight? Let me tell you something. Washing toilet, no be qualification for marriage. The insult landed hard. The room went quiet. Ngozi stood frozen, hurt in her eyes, tears threatening to spill. Guests turned. Some smirked. Some gasped. But before Chioma could continue, a voice echoed across the hall like thunder. Enough. Damien had stepped forward, microphone in hand, spotlight catching the sharpness in his eyes. He walked to the center of the hall and pointed directly at Chioma. You mock the woman who built something from nothing? You insult someone who never stole from me, never lied, never used me. He paused. Let me educate you all. This woman here is the most dignified soul in this room. She didn't dress in gold, but she wears more value than any diamond on your fingers. The crowd was stunned. Damien walked to Ngozi slowly, took her hand, oil-stained fingers and all, and raised it. This is Ngozi, my chef, my heart, my future. The room erupted. Some gasped, some clapped, some whispered. But it didn't matter. Damien had made his choice, loudly, clearly, publicly. Chioma stood still, shaking with rage, mascara running down her cheeks. Amarachi turned and left. And Ngozi? She didn't speak. She simply looked up at him, tears flowing, and whispered, Why? Damien smiled gently. Because I'm done hiding. And you, Ngozi, are the only thing I've ever been proud to show off. That night, love stopped being a secret. It became a revolution. The following week, the city buzzed with gossip. News outlets, blogs, and corporate circles couldn't stop talking about the billionaire who publicly declared love for his maid. Some praised Damien for his courage. Others mocked him. Memes flooded social media. From mop to mansion. Wife material, 1,000 yards. But Damien didn't flinch. He stayed silent through it all. Not once did he give an interview or make a statement. Instead, he poured his energy into one thing, planning the moment that would matter most, the proposal. He didn't want cameras. No grand ballroom. No helicopter rides. He wanted something honest. So he reserved the entire small restaurant space Ngozi had built, the one she still ran every evening after her maid duties. He arranged for her workers to take the day off and quietly redecorated the place with soft lights, traditional music, and fresh white roses. In the center of the only table, he placed an envelope and the black card that started it all. That evening, Ngozi came to the shop expecting a surprise customer. She wore her usual gown, no makeup, scarf loosely tied. But when she opened the door, she gasped. Candles flickered. Her name was spelled in petals on the floor. And there, in the middle of her own restaurant, stood Damien, in a clean native Igbada, no suit, no billionaire mask, just himself. She stood frozen. "What is this?" she whispered. He walked to her slowly, took her hand, and led her to the table. "Sit," he said. "There's something I want to return." She sat, trembling. He slid the black card across the table. Her eyes widened. "Sir, sho," he cut in gently. "Ngozi, I gave this card to 2 women to test their hearts. They failed. You didn't even receive the card and still passed. You didn't buy clothes. You built a future. You didn't run away. You worked. You didn't ask for anything. But you gave me everything." She was already crying now. Silent, full tears. He knelt. Damien reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I have built empires, Ngozi. But you're the only person who made me want to build a home. I've dated models, influencers, heiresses. But I only saw God when I saw you kneel and return what didn't belong to you. You reminded me that real love isn't loud, it's loyal." He opened the box. A simple gold ring, no diamond. Just engraved words inside. "You fed me love." He looked into her eyes. "Will you marry me? Not as my maid, not as a project, but as my partner, my peace, my proof that grace still exists." Ngozi covered her face and wept. Not because she doubted, but because this moment wasn't just a proposal. It was a resurrection of dignity, of hope, of the little girl who once thought rich men only looked at women on magazine covers. Now here she was, wearing slippers, but wearing his heart too. "Yes," she whispered. "A million times, yes." The days that followed were filled with quiet joy. No loud parties. No pre-wedding hashtags. Just love, in its purest, most sacred form. Mama Neka became Ngozi's closest confidant, teaching her family recipes, sharing marriage wisdom, and defending her boldly to naysayers who tried to throw stones. "She's not the maid," she told one stubborn uncle. "She's the woman my son found God in." Damien's friends, especially Uche and Kelvin, were forced to eat their words. They arrived one evening with champagne and guilt-laced grins. "You get eyebrow. We no understand before," Kelvin said, shaking his head. Damien didn't gloat. He only replied, "Some things are only visible to men who know what love costs." Ngozi, now balancing her new life with the same quiet humility, expanded her restaurant. Damien bought her a second location, but in her name alone. "Let your name feed generations," he told her. And so she began mentoring other young women, teaching them not just how to cook, but how to carry their pain with pride. At their small engagement ceremony, held in her village compound, tears flowed freely. Guests sat on white plastic chairs, under canopies of raffia palm and balloons. No celebrities, just elders, neighbors, old teachers. Damien wore a simple ayesigu and danced without shame to the village drummers. When it was time to speak, he stood before the crowd and said, "I once had everything, but I was empty. Then I met a woman who cooked with firewood and gave me peace money couldn't buy." Ngozi was dressed in a red lace iro and blouse, barefaced, glowing. The women ululated. The children danced. And somewhere between laughter and vows, the world tilted, just enough to show that sometimes fairy tales don't start in castles. They begin in compound kitchens, with a girl who dared to believe her kindness wasn't a curse. Back in Lagos, after the ceremony, Damien walked into the now empty buka one evening. He stood where she once cooked her first pot of jollof. He remembered the smoke, the sweat, the night he sat in his car and whispered, "She's beautiful." Now she was his wife, his home. She walked in quietly behind him, now dressed in a soft babou gown, holding a bowl of stew. "You look lost," she teased. He smiled, just remembering what almost slipped through my fingers. She walked over, stood beside him, and placed the bowl down. "You didn't lose me," she whispered. "You found me." When no one else was looking, they sat down together. No butlers, no cameras, just a man and a woman, and a love that began not with a kiss, but with 700,000 Nigerian nairas, a black card, and a dream cooked over firewood. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.